it's very easy to slip into a zero-sum dynamic with any of these constituencies. It's like the customers all want to pay less. The employees all want to make more. The owners of the capital table want a greater return on their capital at risk. Business partners, they all want more profits too. And so the goal is to create sufficiency in all those constituencies with your vision, offer a future where, hey, look, if we keep playing this game into perpetuity, there's a scenario where we can all benefit more even. One of the primary jobs of a CEO, I think, is to create a vision that can include as many winners as possible. Great management might start with data, but it doesn't end with data. We started trying to implement values very early. Again, I was in my mid-20s. So the first problem with core values, almost all core values, is that nobody knows them. Your core values have to be memorable and branded. I really believe that values need to be iterated just like a strategy is iterated, because the chances that you're going to get it right the very first time is close to zero. I think you need to have a big, hairy, audacious goal, something that's inspiring. And I actually believe that small goals are not inspiring. And because they're not inspiring, sometimes they're actually harder to achieve. They don't generate the sufficient energy to manifest. Something exciting can actually generate sufficient energy to manifest. So you need this big, hairy, audacious goal. I really think that a vision needs to be externalized. It's really, really helpful to think of the leader as the first follower of an externalized vision. We really wanted IT to be done well. We wanted to end poorly managed IT. And then we really believed in the other side of that.
This is the Business Philosopher Within You podcast. I'm your host, Bhavesh Naik. A core theme we often visit on this podcast is that when the humanness of our people is the foundation of our business, we create high-performing organizations that stand the test of time. Is it possible for leaders to scale a company to substantial revenues while nurturing a truly values-driven, people-centric culture without sacrificing purpose? To explore this, I've invited a very special guest to join us. Mike Chaput is the founder and CEO of Endsight, whose purpose is to help other businesses thrive through reliable IT support. Since 2004, Mike has scaled Endsight from the ground up into a company of 140 people, serving over 400 business clients across California and Hawaii, generating $35 million in annual revenues with best-in-class margins. Through it all, Mike has cultivated a deeply values-driven culture with a leadership philosophy that's rooted in the belief that leaders must be servants first. In this first part of our conversation, we'll explore how culture and values can fuel business growth. I am pleased to have you on this podcast, Mike.
Thanks, Bhavesh. Great to be here. Thanks for all the attention of your listeners as well.
And a special shout out to you, our listener. Hey, listen, we learn from each other and grow with each other. This podcast won't be possible without you, without your interest and your engagement. Please remember to like, subscribe, follow, share, comment, and most important, ask and answer questions. Thank you for tuning in. So, Endsight, Mike. I love that name. It's different. And it evokes basically to me, at least in my mind, Endsight, right? There's something that's happening at the end, all right? Like a vision type of thing. So, but I'll let you explain that. What does it mean? And what's the genesis of that name?
Well, Bhavesh, it's funny that you start with that question because it really takes me back to when we founded the company. So I'm going all the way back to 2004, and it felt like every name was taken. Like we couldn't find a domain name. We couldn't find any names whatsoever. And, we hired a couple creative types to kind of look for any possible, we were looking for a .com name so badly. We really wanted a .com name. And we couldn't find one. So we were down to the .nets, and we had like all this list of .nets, and, the Endsight really spoke to us, and we didn't really know why. But we were like, we can't mess around here. We got to have a name. And so then we kind of tried to back in We kind of tried to back into it wasn't like we had this great idea and then, we came up with the name Endsight. It was like we looked for any names available and then we tried to back into how we could make that name work for our ethos.
Yeah.
And so that's the unfortunate truth behind it. But it worked for us because there was two things we wanted to try to do. One was we really believed in kind of ending, poorly managed IT. Like
Right.
it bothered us. We hated it. We really wanted IT to be done well. We wanted to end poorly managed IT. And then we really believed in the other side of that, seeing people win or thrive, we call it.
Sure.
And so the two words to us were like, hey, look, this is good. We can end the bad thing, the IT suffering, and then we can see the good thing, people thrive. And so Endsight was kind of like the idea there. And I remember that you're bringing it up. It was we used to host these events every third Thursday. We call them third Thursdays. I still remember it now. And we had this really cool office in Berkeley with this loft thing. We would figure out cool things to do. And our sales leader at the time was working at the comedy school in San Francisco. And so he had the idea to bring in comedians or a comedian. And it was actually hilarious. So the comedian came in and his first joke was something like, so I never thought I'd be working for the company that's trying to end vision, it, and we all thought that was funny. So anyway, so there it goes, Endsight. We had this really kind of idealistic, we backed into this really idealistic idea. And then, the first thing people thought about was, we're trying to end vision. So
yeah. The Endsight is that you don't have any IT problems, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And on that point, kind of just tagging on to that, most companies, and I like to talk about this idea of vision, right? For our listeners, the idea of vision, it is never static and it evolves, right, as the companies go. But there is always a vision, or sometimes, not always, but there is typically a vision, sometimes conscious, but sometimes subconscious. When you start a company, so when you take on a new venture, there is sort of like an idea of what we want that enterprise to be like, somewhere down the line, year, 5 year, 10 year, 100 years down the road. So the question I have for you, Mike, is did you have a vision for the company when you started? And there's actually a spectrum, and I just kind of like to calibrate this. I hear two kinds of stories. We had a vision. We knew exactly what we wanted. We had a business plan, and this is what we want it to be. And a vision can be defined in so many different ways, right? What do you want my business to look like, right? Somewhere down the line. And so some people have it. Some people, for a lot of folks, actually there is quite a few people that I talk to where they say, well, we started just doing A, B, C, X, Y, Z, and something got traction. And we just kind of did more of that. And it was like a snowball effect. And it just blew up into something successful and big and thriving. And then the third option is sort of like, you start with an idea or vision and then you pivot, right, somewhere down the line. So do you fall into any of those kinds of definition or do you have a different story?
Well, it turns out vision is actually one of my favorite, my literal favorite topic. Uh-huh. And I could probably go 30 minutes on just this piece.
Right.
To give you the context of my personal story, I got involved in entrepreneurship way too early. I would never recommend this to anybody in retrospect, but I was 24 years old and my business partner and I borrowed money and we bought an existing IT consultancy.
Right.
And we transacted in January of 2000, and it was 3 months later, the .com bubble crashed. And so you had an inversion of supply and demand. So there was at the time, the business model was reselling of hardware, which there was just an abundance in the aftermarket, which, you could get it almost for free at auction. And nobody, there was way too much, let's say, build out of service infrastructure for demand because up to that point in time, there was just a huge demand for IT systems integrations. And we were 24 years old. I mean, I didn't even understand how to read a profit and loss statement very well, much less a balance sheet. I had an engineering background. I wasn't good at sales. I had to figure that out. I didn't have an operational background. Neither did my partner. So we were just over our heads. in total. And somehow, against all odds, we managed to survive for 4 years. And honestly, out of all the things I've done in my life, just surviving that for so long was like seems like for kind of where I was at, that was like one of the seriously improbable things. I thought we were going to go under like every day for 4 years. So, back then we didn't really have much of a vision. We were just trying to survive. We were just trying to figure out how to live another day and make payroll and like deliver the service to the clients.
Yeah.
And, in retrospect, looking back at it, it's like, it's so hard to get other people to buy into what you're trying to do when your vision is so uninspiring. Like, who wants to work for that? Like, well, the answer is nobody. That's not very exciting. I mean, people will do it because they need to work and they need the money or whatever. And sometimes they'll do it for momentum or because they're already doing it.
Right.
But it's not really that inspirational. And it's very hard to get people's best effort in that kind of environment. And so, I learned other forms of leadership, in particular, the affiliative style of leadership, which is like really take a personal interest in people and really try to help understand them and invest in them as human beings, and they'll follow you just for that.
Right.
But the vision for the company wasn't very exciting. When we finally went bankrupt in 2004 and we started Endsight, it was kind of similar. Like, we didn't have any money. We had no capitalization. The bankruptcy was both personal and professional. So there was we had to bootstrap, and I mean, seriously bootstrap.
Yeah.
Part of our capitalization strategy was, selling retainers. So people would pay us up front for their work and we would discount our rates in order to do it till we could make profit to kind of capitalize our business. And, then the first kind of inkling of a vision I got was, I went to a peer group meeting in September of 2004. And I met a guy who's kind of famous in my industry. His name's Gary Pica. And he had this business called Dynamic Digital out of Philadelphia.
Right.
And it made good money, and it was a recurring service model. And I was fascinated by it. And, sometimes you get lucky in life, and that was one of those situations. And I asked him if I could come out to Philadelphia and see what he was doing. And he invited me, opened everything up. I interviewed everybody on his staff. I saw all the service delivery. And then I had this like, okay, this is it. This is what we're going to do.
Yeah.
We started that business in May of 2004, and we were just taking any job we could get with anybody who knew us and trusted us from our work that we had done in the past. And then in September, we went all in. Only a handful of months later, went all in on the IT managed services strategy, which is this recurring model. We didn't want to sell, like, it was very risky at that time, but like, we didn't really have that much to lose, So we're like, all right, well, all we're going to not sell projects. All we're going to sell is these recurring managed services contracts. And we had a Rolodex of people who we had worked for over the last 4 years. We called all of them. We won a bunch of early clients, and then we went to market with new customers. But even that, if I look back, even that vision wasn't that exciting to people,
Right.
like it was a successful business strategy, but it wasn't a compelling human vision. It wasn't something that people would say, I want to be a part of.
Sure.
And, one of the primary jobs of a CEO, I think, is to create a vision that can include as many winners as possible. So what do I mean? It's like you have all these constituencies or people who interact with your company. You have customers,
right?
And your vision needs to incorporate how they're going to win through their relationship and engagement.
Yeah.
You have employees,
right?
And your vision needs to, like, if you materialize your vision, they need to see clearly how that's going to be good for them.
Yeah.
And then you have shareholders, and shareholders, this gets constantly confused when you have, let's say, a sole proprietorship or even a small capital table with like a business partner.
Right.
But if your shareholders aren't engaged, like if it's not interesting for the people who own it, they'll sell it. And then all the other people who are winning, their dreams come crashing down with a new person, maybe with a less idealistic vision. So you still need it to win for the shareholders if it's going to be sustainable.
Yeah.
And then you even have an ecosystem beyond that. So you might think all the families of all those people, all the end users who work for the customers, and of course all of the business partners, accountants and software providers that depend on the revenue that your company generates.
Yeah.
And if you're really good, you think about them too. It's not zero sum. You're thinking about how do we create win-win partnerships that creates value across all these agencies, and you create a vision that incorporates that.
Yeah.
Because then you have everybody in your corner. And the thing about it is it's very easy to slip into a zero-sum dynamic with any of these constituencies.
Right.
It's like the customers all want to pay less. The employees all want to make more. The owners of the capital table want a greater return on their capital risk. Business partners, they all want more profits too. And so the goal is to create sufficiency in all those constituencies with your vision. You can't give everybody everything that they want, but offer a future where, hey, look, if we keep playing this game into perpetuity, there's a scenario where we can all benefit more even. My service offering can get better for the customers. I can include more. I can pay my people a little bit more, give you opportunity to advance.
Right.
I can grow my revenue base. So your software product, you have more seats.
Sure.
And the capital table holders, like you give up a little bit something now, but you might get, a higher value organization in the future, and it might be more durable and stable. And so you negotiate a vision that creates sufficiency across all these, and some kind of hopes and dreams, and some lofty importance.
Absolutely.
So maybe I'll give it back to you to follow up. But this is, like I say, I think about vision a lot. So
I'm loving it. There's a number of things that said that I absolutely love. One of the things he's saying is that the vision is, you actually implying for whom is the vision, right? And that is such an important question, right? Is it just for me, the owner, or is it just me and the partners, or is it just me and the employees, or is it just for the customers? What you're saying is that all of the above, and the ecosystem and the community and the family and the investors and the partners and, all of the people who interact with the company, and the vision is for them. And I have to believe there is, if you draw like Venn diagram circles, there is something that, it comes together at some level. So I love that. I love the idea of that. And it's easy to talk about. It's very difficult to execute, right? And
maybe I'll say one more thing that kind of connects to your opening. And thank you for that opening, by the way.
Sure.
But a vision, I really think that a vision needs to be externalized.
Yeah.
Okay. So you can imagine that a lot of CEOs have this idea in their mind.
Right.
And they see all the gaps between their ideal, their future state. Like what all vision really is a description of a future state with where you're going.
Right.
And it's in the head of the visionary, or that can be the founder, CEO.
Yeah.
And they're seeing all the gaps and what needs to get done, and they're directing.
Yeah.
But then, something happens, or they see a news article, and all of a sudden they're directing differently, and it creates like a whipsaw. They're turning, and then the organization's going this way, and then all of a sudden they're swinging this way, and they're going this way,
right?
And it gets really hard for everybody to even understand. Like, I thought we were doing this, and then now we're doing this, and you're following this thing, and it's really, really helpful to think of the leader as the first follower of an externalized vision. So you create an externalized vision, and now the leader is not leading everybody, but the vision is leading everybody.
Yeah.
And the leader is the first follower to the vision. Yeah. So you got to get the vision right. And the other piece that I think often maybe is a little bit misunderstood is like, what is a vision? And Bhavesh, you probably know a lot of these things, but there's Gino Wickman's EOS. There's Patrick Lencioni has a thing called The Advantage.
Right.
There's Rockefeller Habits by Vern Harnish, and he has the one-page business plan. These are all tools. The EOS calls it the Vision Traction Organizer.
Sure. Yeah.
There's all these tools out there for CEOs to try to create an externalized vision.
Yeah.
And they're all very popular because they there's a requirement, a bunch of forms I have to fill out in order to get it. But to me, it's like the forms are a tool. I actually have often thought that the best way of thinking about creating a vision is construction. Because in construction, it's an insufficient criteria to tell a contractor, I need a 4-bedroom home.
Yeah.
Like that universe is so wide.
Yeah.
And there's like 10 million decisions that need to get made. And if you actually look at what a construction project has, it has a front picture with then there's a just giant, enormous amount of details under there. There's the mechanical drawings, the plumbing drawings, the electrical drawings, there's a flooring plan, there's a ceiling plan, there's all this stuff.
Yeah.
And if you want a bunch of your team to build your vision, you've got to have a big picture. You have to know what you're doing. Like I want a 4-bedroom home.
Yeah.
Or 4-bedroom, 4-bath, or whatever it is. But then you also have to know like what my paint colors are.
Yeah.
What the tiles are, and you have to know all the detail required to manifest that in construction.
Yes.
And so a great business vision is the same. I think a great vision starts with, this is one of the things I agree with Jim Collins about. I think you need to have a big, hairy, audacious goal, something that's inspiring.
Yeah.
And I actually believe that small goals are not inspiring. And because they're not inspiring, sometimes they're actually harder to achieve. They don't generate the sufficient energy to manifest.
Right.
Something exciting can actually generate sufficient energy to manifest.
Yes.
So you need this big, hairy, audacious goal. And that becomes there's a thought leader named Arthur Brooks, and he's brilliant, by the way, a Harvard Business School professor. He wrote a book called Strength to Strength. And he uses this term called a rum line, and that's like it's sailors use this, by the way. They draw a line kind of all the way through. It's a curved line, like a great circle line, with which all the calculations for tacting happen. Because you can't just sail across the rum line. You have to like tact with the wind.
Right.
But all your calculations for your tact are based on this rum line.
Yeah.
So if you think about a big, hairy, audacious goal as being way out there, it becomes the rum line for all the tacks necessary to achieve it. It becomes the thing that's like we're always checking in with as we're making our tacks.
Absolutely.
And it's this big goal that gets fractionated into smaller and smaller goals that end up being all the way to be like, well, what am I going to do tomorrow at 2:00?
Yeah, sure.
And it gets to that level of detail. What are the daily metrics that I need to achieve in order for us to be on target to the rum line? What are the strategic things that I need to invent or solve, or problems I need to fix, and so on and so forth. So that's, great vision is guiding everything, including daily action.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. And I think something else that you're implying that's right underneath everything that you're saying is that, engagement, you're talking about, it's not just transaction, right? I think you were kind of implying that it's not just a transaction with the investor, not the transaction with the employee. I show up and do the work, you pay me. Same thing with anyone who gets into partners, vendors, people like that. But there is an engagement, and that engagement, it's like an emotional engagement. It's almost like visceral, that you care about this company beyond the transaction, right? And so, and Big Hairy Audacious Goal, the BHAG that Jim Collins talks about, that kind of, it is one of the factors in facilitating that, right? You kind of get attached to that, and you kind of get inspired by that, right?
Well, there's a molecular biological component to it too that I think is particularly interesting. So it turns out that the reason why video games are so kind of attractive and addictive is they play into this biological setup that's in our brain. So our emotions are actually relative to our goals.
Yes.
So we experience positive emotions as we make progress towards our goals, and negative emotions as we see our distance or entropy from our goals.
Yeah.
But there's a very interesting takeaway from this, which is no goals equals no positive emotion. The only way, in fact, you could, let's say, use chemistry, you could take fentanyl or something, but if you want to have access to the natural good feelings for your goals, you have to set a target, and then you can access your positive emotions when you make progress. So what you're doing by a leader, by setting a target, is you're actually creating the fundamental requirement of your team to experience positive emotion in your work. And now
Yeah.
you know this intuitively. Like
Mhm.
if somebody tells you to go dig a hole and fill it back up, you know that that's just absolutely draining.
Yeah.
And you also know that you'll spend like hours doing something that's about as useful as digging a hole and filling it up, like playing a digital game.
Right.
And the only difference is the digital game is creating like levels and skill advances, and you're seeing progress towards some arbitrary goal that's
Absolutely.
not actually impacting anything in the real world, but it feels somehow like fun and positive to you, whereas digging a hole and filling it up doesn't.
Yeah.
And the same thing is required. Like your team needs that. You know, they need a target.
Yeah.
Or otherwise they feel like they're digging holes and filling them back up. And that's just,
Yeah.
you know, I always say that the line between toil and meaning is like incredibly thin.
Yes.
And it's like, you know, and all of your employees are teetering on that thin line. They're either going to have purpose and mission in their work, or it's just going to be toil for them.
Yeah.
And the leader's job is to swing that to the meaning and purpose side by trying to help employees understand that the work that they do does matter, so that is impacting people, it's impacting themselves and their families and their customers.
Yeah.
And it's having a community impact that people care about.
Sure.
And get them out of that cycle where they feel like they're just digging a hole and filling it back up.
Got it. And when you started Endsight, did you did you have a vision at the time in the beginning that sort of fills some of the check boxes, in some of the things that we talked about, or it evolved?
So, you know, I didn't understand it very well.
Yeah.
So, if I take you back to kind of how I got there, I was able to tactically execute on this before I was able to strategically understand it. So in my first company, which was called PCS Networks, I was part of an organization in San Francisco called YEO. It's now called EO. And I haven't been in that organization for a while. I'm in a different organization called YPO. They're affiliated.
Sure.
But I was in EO, and there was two speakers that had a significant impact on me. One of the speakers was Vern Harnish. He was the founder of YEO, and he had written the book Rockefeller Habits. I was a voracious reader at the time. I didn't know what I was doing, so I would just go to the bookstore and pick up business books, and I was commuting, so I'd get the audio versions, and if they were really good, I'd get the written versions and go back through with a highlighter. Yeah. So I'd read all the Jim Collins work about BHAGs and
Good to Great and
then
Built to Last, and
and then I read Rockefeller Habits by Vern Harnish, and it was more like a how-to manual. So it was the first time I started like setting 5-year targets, 3-year targets, quarterly rocks. Yeah. And I started doing this. Yeah. As a very young man, I was my mid-20s at the time, and I had the vision. The vision was this thing, but I didn't really understand it. I didn't understand it well enough to be able to articulate why it's so important and how it affects people. Sure. And I didn't really know a good vision from a bad vision at the time. But I was doing it. So, we started doing Rockefeller Habits. The other guy that I met there was Patrick Lencioni, who spoke on a cruise boat, actually. I never forget it. And then I started reading his books, but, and he came up with a different business planning tool called The Advantage. I mentioned that. Right. But anyhow, so I was doing visionary work, as a very young man, but just cycles year after year, and then reading more and more thought leadership about it. I started to really figure out why it mattered. What was insufficient about the early work that I was doing. It's more than just filling out forms and how to, and really, by the way, I want to say the human impact of it, my whole thing, the ethos of leadership at Endsight for my level is vision and values. And we haven't really gotten to values yet. Right. Yeah. But, to me, like, if you get these things right, you don't just create a workplace that wins. You create a really like pro-human workplace where people, they have access to good feelings. Yes. They get rewarded and recognized. They feel motivated. Right. If they feel motivated, by the way, they're gonna do better economically. That's just obvious. Sure. Like if they're unmotivated and disengaged, like they're not gonna win economically in that scenario. So and then your customers aren't gonna win that in that scenario either. So it turns out that having a great vision and having a great culture creates an environment where workers are more likely to give their best effort. And if they give their best effort, they're more likely to win economically.
Yeah.
The customers are more likely to get better circumstances. The company as a unit is going to be more likely to be profitable in something that the capital stakeholders are engaged in and happy with. So
Sure.
it really comes down to this idea of how do you create a great culture, a great vision that creates the engagement necessary for this ecosystem to win.
Sure. And before we go to the values, and I do want to talk about the values, what is your vision today? What the vision of Endsight?
So at Endsight, we've always been kind of really obsessive about quality. And so, you might think quality is something like customer service scores or something, but it's actually way more robust than that. So we got deep into the literature on lean. So I don't know if you know much about lean, but it goes back to Edwards Deming, who's this
Six Sigma and all that, right? Yeah.
Yeah. He's a little different than Six Sigma, right. But it's close. He was a Yale professor or something like this, or PhD anyway, and he got into the automotive sector here in the States, but he ended up going to Japan after World War II to help them rebuild the economy.
Yeah.
And he brought all these ideas. He's famous for the 14 points of management. Yeah. So if any of your viewers want to know anything about Edwards Deming, they can go to ChatGPT and they can start with Edward Deming's. It's Edwards Deming, excuse me.
Yeah.
We'll
put that in the show notes. Yeah.
And he created these 14 points of management, and he kind of married it with Japanese culture at Toyota.
Yeah.
And Toyota went from almost nothing in the automotive sector to the cheapest, least effective cars in the planet.
Yeah.
And they became a powerhouse under this culture. And then since a lot of these ideas spread.
Yeah.
And so quality isn't just about like, oh, that was a good support ticket. It's about doing it effectively.
Yeah.
With minimal error, minimal waste.
Yeah.
And so we got really obsessive about quality. And so we really thought that there was our space is this kind of weird fragmented space with a lot of very small, regional players and not a lot. Well, now it's a little bit different. A lot of them, there's been this roll up thing in the private equity sector, but the legacy was like, like the local movie theaters before they all got rolled up. And we thought that there was just a real opportunity for somebody to come in with a quality orientation and change the paradigm for the customers and consumers.
Yeah.
So we decided that we were going to target being the highest quality IT managed services provider in the planet, worldwide, globally. And that created a rum line, because it was like, well, okay, what does that even mean?
Right.
And how would we measure it?
Yeah.
And what would be the metrics?
Yeah.
And what would have to be true?
Sure.
So you can see now, okay, if this were true, if we were the highest quality managed services and provider, you could start seeing how it fractionates. You could say, okay, well, that would probably mean that we would keep our customers because they would be seeing a lot of value.
Yeah.
And it would mean that we would be attractive to new customers in the marketplace. So that would mean we'd be growing. We'd be able to know if this were true, or one of the metrics that would be on track, would we be growing?
Yeah.
And the second, side of it would be like, okay, well, it would also mean we would be profitable, because quality means we're doing it efficiently. It doesn't mean there's like a lot of waste.
Yeah.
So it's not just good for the customers. It means that it's throwing off, it's yielding profits while it's doing that.
Right.
So you could then see, okay, well, if we're going to keep customers, and customer satisfaction scores would be there.
Yeah.
Right. And if we were going to do it efficiently, that would mean like our billable time efficiencies, like how much time our people were spending on billable work, would we be able to measure that high? And it starts to create all these subordinate metrics underneath that drive our entire engine. And then when we start getting off, we can start going, wait a minute, like, or when we're looking at strategic decisions, like how does this strategic decision help us become the highest quality managed services provider in the world?
Yeah.
And all that sits under this kind of idea of a noble promise or ethos, which is to help other people thrive.
Yeah.
So that basically is a constraint.
Yeah.
So if we could be profitable or grow, but let's say in order to do it, we had to sell cotton candy vape pens to teenagers.
Yeah.
We'd be like, well, does that help people thrive? And if the answer to that is no, then those decisions are just taken off the table for us.
Yeah.
So we look at trying to be the highest quality MSP worldwide. That's kind of the through line, the rum line. And then we have this constraining noble promise, which is to help other people thrive. And then there's just a ton of subordinate goals and strategic items that we now know have to be managed in order for us to be able to get there. And we can compare across industry and pair groups and see how we're doing. And we can see, hey, are we winning?
Yeah.
Are we on track to do this or not?
Yeah.
And that would be the kind of the essence of our vision.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for laying that out so beautifully. One of the things that folks struggle with, I think, there are vision people who can create beautiful visions and, BHAG and all of the rest of it, right? And there are those who are excellent executors, or they're executive, right? They can, achieve the goals, and they can break it down in small goals and things like that. But it's often that there is a disconnect between the two, right? And what you're saying is that, it's a whole thing that kind of trickles down to the daily basis, that the daily activities that everybody's taking in your company, right? It is that. So, and at any given day, any given moment, an employee in your company can potentially, consciously or subconsciously, refer to, what's the overall objective and overall vision. And based on that, they can make decisions, they can take certain actions, and they can choose not to take certain actions. So the question I have for you, Mike, is how do you do that? I mean, where the rubber meets the road? Do you do this in your Monday morning meeting? Do you talk about this? Do you kind of ask their managers to kind of drill it down, or have some kind of a feedback from them, have some kind of a conversation with them? What's the golden ticket to making it come alive on a daily basis?
Yeah. So what you're asking is, how do you cascade? How do you cascade, waterfall?
Yeah.
This all the way down
and make it real. Make it real, as in
and make it tangible. This, by the way, is just as important on the value side. But let's stick with the vision side for a second.
Sure.
So Vern Harnish kind of answers this in the Rockefeller Habits, but ultimately it's a clock.
Yeah.
So you have a series of activities that are done inside of a time frame.
Right.
And one of the things that happens is sometimes I feel like you're having, maybe you're having meetings that aren't that productive or something like that, and everybody's like, well, do we really need to have this meeting and all that kind of stuff? And it's like, it's seductive, because you do have to get the clock right. You can meet too frequently, and you can space things out a little bit differently. Yeah. But it definitely starts with a annual strategic, the cascade starts with an annual strategic leadership meeting.
Okay. And you do that like at retreat or something like that?
Yes. Yeah. So we go, usually the best practice is to go offsite somewhere, rent a big VRBO.
Yeah. VRBO is
what
lock. Yeah. What?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
Not virtual. Yeah. It's we do it in person.
Yeah.
I mean, it's too much work to try to do it virtual.
Yeah, sure.
I strongly recommend to shell out the money to get everybody to go and get together.
Yeah.
You form great connections.
Sure.
It starts with trust. So, you don't just jump into the planning.
Right.
We do a lot of work to try to make sure that everybody is seen, heard, connected, understood. It's a huge part of our culture. Our first core value is respect and connect. So connection is important. We have a bunch of exercises to create connection. There's a great exercise. If you have nothing else, there's a pragmatic, you can do this exercise called Zulization. You just go around and everybody gives one compliment to everybody else on the team. You end up with a compliment from everybody on the team. Right. It feels great. You can do gratitude. Yeah. We've done something that's much deeper. And if it's your first time doing anything, where you go through your lifeline, you talk about the most important and impactful moments of your life with the group, and the people start to understand your personal ethics and why you have them and who's important to you. But you have to have that basic connection, because if you don't have trust, the rest of the planning won't work.
Got it.
So you do that work, you get the trust. We're humans before we're business people.
Sure.
So you do that stuff. Then you go into the plan, whatever tool you're using,
right,
and you just fill it out.
Yeah.
You figure out what your where you want to be in 10 years.
Yeah.
That's your BHAG. Where you want to, where along the run line would you be in 5 years if you could just wave a magic wand? Where would you be in 1 year if you were on track? What would your metrics look like if you were on track this year?
Mm-hmm.
What were your quarterly objectives necessary to get to that 1 year's target, and so on and so forth? And you just get it down to the, okay, now, like, what would our team have to do starting on Monday that they're not doing? What
Right.
problems would we have to solve? They make quarterly rocks. Now,
Yeah.
once you have this strategic plan, then we have a weekly strategic meeting once a week.
Right.
We start every update with, we call it good news, but it's essentially recognition. So
Sure.
we find people on the team who are winning.
Yeah.
So like, if I attend that meeting and somebody said, I just like listen.
Mm-hmm.
And then if I hear people are winning, I usually fire them an email and tell them that people are talking about
Mm-hmm.
them, that their work is seen.
Yeah.
So we always start with something that's human, something that's connecting,
Yeah.
something that's good news to raise the spirits.
Yeah.
And then we just go into, like, we have a problem register where we keep all of our problems. We look at our strategic stuff. We figure out if there's things that
Got
need to be debugged or solved. We check in, we make sure people are on track, and we get them unstuck in that. And then, of course, there's weekly huddles, sometimes multiple weekly huddles across teams where you're looking at problems each day.
Sure.
And you just have these rhythms, that your organization are doing to keep on track and to make sure you're on track, and where people can, they can raise a hand and say, hey, I'm stuck, we're off track, we're not going to meet this goal.
Yeah.
And then people can descend on the problem. Maybe the goal's wrong.
Sure.
Maybe the approach is wrong.
Yeah.
And it is the work,
Yeah.
you work on the business and in the business.
Got it.
Yeah. The funny, it's the funny thing is, like, you got to change the car while the car is driving, or change the tire while the car is driving. And, and I mean, that's the case, right?
Yeah.
You have to work on the business while getting it done.
Absolutely.
So that you can iterate towards where you want to be. If you do everything the same, you're going to be exactly the same.
Right.
So you have to solve problems along the way, and then the world will throw stuff at you, and you'll have
Sure.
to pivot and you'll have to tact around the stuff that the world will throw at you. And that's part of the fun.
Right. It's part of the fun. Yeah. And that's where the human factor comes into play, that, you've all the structures and processes, systems and purpose and all the rest of it. But in the moment, a human has to make a human decision. If you have a upset client, you need to do what you need to do in the moment to, within your guidelines to make that customer happy, right? One question I want to ask you while we're on this topic, Mike, is one-on-one, like manager to employee, is that a part of this, or is it one to many?
100%. So every employee has at least one-on-one every other week, if not weekly. This is really actually, like, sometimes we there's an expression in auto racing where you slow down to go fast. And what that means, by the way, is that people who are trying to go for speed, they come into a curve and they come in too fast. And so then when they make the curve, their tires slip.
Right.
And that's really slow.
Yeah.
If you come in at the appropriate speed where your tires grip, which is slower, you're going to get through the curve a lot faster.
Yeah.
And this is a case, by the way, with a lot of managers. They're like, oh, I'm a billable employee or an employee who's doing a job, and I don't want to take them off that job to do a one-on-one. And managers are expensive, and I don't want them. That one-on-one meeting cost me X dollars by the time I look at the hourly rates or whatever, and that's really expensive, so I want to minimize it. That's your tires are going to slip.
Right.
You're going too fast, so you got to slow down.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, we're human beings first. We're workers second.
Yeah.
So people have human things that they need to, like, get off their chest, get off their mind. They want to, and so a big part of the one-on-one, it's not all just like driving home metrics and it is that, by the way. It's also, doing your development plans and all these kind of things. But sometimes there's just stuff that's going on in your life, and you need to get on the same page with somebody who's in your corner. And so your manager should really be, a partner in your professional life. And sometimes they need a coach outside of your life to be a great partner in your professional life. Sometimes that stuff's bleeding over and you need strategy and you need a collaborator. Yeah. So, it starts with connection at the one-on-one, and then it gets into the pragmatic. If you're off track on metrics, or if you need training, or if you don't understand something, or if you need a mentor, you can get that done, or if there's development stuff. And then there's accountability. And so accountability is one of these things where it sounds bad, if you're an employee and you're like, oh God, there's somebody
I'm accountable.
help hold me accountable.
Yeah.
But if you actually think about the world, people pay an enormous amount of money for accountability. So that's what a financial planner is. Essentially, they're trying to hold you accountable to spend the appropriate amount and save the appropriate amount. That's what a trainer really is. At the end of the day, they teach you how to do it. Do exercise too. But part of why people pay trainers is just because they hold people accountable to get to the gym and get physical.
Yeah. Accountability
is a gift, and if you care about having a great career, like if you care about making money, maybe getting promoted or being efficient or being respected by your colleagues, like if that's important to you at all, which it should be, then what's better than an individual whose job it is to help you do that?
Yes.
That's they're paid to help you have the best career you can possibly have.
Yeah. Yes.
And that means that they're going to say sometimes uncomfortable things that are going to force you to reflect about what you're doing and what you're prioritizing and how you're working.
Yeah.
But that uncomfortable thing is necessary.
Yeah.
And the other thing is they see you outside your body, which is super important. Like, if you ever videotaped yourself doing anything, it sounds different. Like if you play an instrument, if you videotape it and watch yourself, you're like, oh, that didn't sound like I heard it when I played it.
Yeah.
If you play a sport and you videotape it, you watch yourself play, make the basketball shot or whatever, it looks different. You're like, oh my God, I look ugly compared to watching Steph Curry. I didn't think I looked that way. I thought I was looking great. So they see you from outside your body, which is great.
Yeah.
They have an incentive for you to win, which is great. And so that's what they're doing. So, one-on-ones are, I would say, essential. Like I don't think they're optional.
Yeah.
If you want a high-performing organization.
Right. And you said something that struck me. I think it's a tremendous nugget of gold. Accountability is a gift. So if someone's holding me accountable, and I have to believe that this dynamic, the dynamic between the two parties, someone who's holding you accountable and someone that you're reporting to, and you also mentioned the word partnership, right? And earlier in the conversation, you talked about affiliative leadership. I don't know if I got that right? So the idea here is to have one-on-one conversation where the manager is not just part of his job or her job and their job is to hold you accountable, and they need to meet the numbers and the certain things and actions that they want you to take. But at the same time, it's a partnership. And their job is to inspire you, have a relationship and partnership with them. And there's almost like a coach, right? So this partnership is, there has to be some level of trust in that, right? For it to work. Otherwise, if someone's just beating me up, right, and being critical, and because the feedback can be given, accountability, someone can be held accountable in a very critical way and very dispirited way, or uninspiring ways, or someone can hold you accountable in an inspiring way, right? So that even if it may sting in the moment, if some things have to be said or talked about. So and listening and talking and all of that, right? So Mike, could you help us be a fly on the wall where, one of your managers is having a conversation with someone who is out in the field, and they came back, customer is upset, and they're having some kind of a conversation about this, and or just pick a moment, it might be more of a proactive meeting where, they're having a conversation with an employee who might be performing okay, but not great. What does that sound like? Or what does it look like?
Okay. So maybe I'll give a little prelude before I answer that question directly. So there's an author, her name is Kim Scott. She wrote a book called Radical Candor.
Yeah.
So I really believe that your company core values need to be rooted in deep thought leadership.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's I don't think they're just like a whim, like, this is how I am and that's my core values. I think they needed to be rooted in great thought leadership. I call it deep. They need to be deep. And so Kim Scott is amongst probably, 25 thought leaders. Edwards Deming, I already mentioned him.
Sure.
But Jim Collins, but there should be a lot of thought leadership behind. There should be a library behind your values. And so Kim Scott is one of the thinkers that sits below the Endsight core values. And she wrote this book called Radical Candor. Uh-huh. And Radical Candor is kind of what we're talking about exactly.
And she
has a subtitle. It's called How to Be a Kick-Ass Boss.
Uh-huh.
And she has this idea. She created a 4x4 matrix. This is like the classic business school 4x4 matrix. And on one side, you have whether a manager or boss is willing to challenge directly.
Yeah.
So they're willing to say difficult things
Right.
that need to be said
Yeah.
in order for the employee to win and for the company to win.
Right.
And then the other axis is, are they connected personally?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so she kind of calls these things out. Like if you're challenging directly, but you have no connection personally,
Right.
then you're obnoxiously aggressive.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like you're just
Right.
aggressive, and the person doesn't feel like the feedback is in their best interest, and they're going to be resistant to that feedback.
Yes.
And on the other hand, if you're connected personally, but you won't challenge them directly because you're afraid of hurting their feelings, let's say, then she calls that ruinously empathetic. So you're empathetic, but to their disinterest.
There's no teeth.
You're empathetic, and meanwhile you're sabotaging their career because what they also need a mentor and a coach and somebody who's going to make them better.
Yeah. Yeah.
And inside this bucket where you're able to both challenge directly and be connected personally, that's what she calls radical candor.
Sure.
And so that's the ethos at Endsight it's actually the connection and trust.
Yeah.
Is the platform with which you stand on to give the difficult feedback. Like Bhavesh, if you know that I really if you believe with all in your heart that I really want you to win.
Yeah.
I want your podcast to be super successful. I want the best for you in your life.
Right. Then
if I tell you, hey, here's a couple things you should do with your podcast.
Absolutely.
Like you're going to listen to those and be like, I know that the ethos there is that I'm really cared about, and it's coming from a spot where this guest just wants me to win.
Right.
But if you think that my feedback is some kind of selfish interest of my own, I want to win.
Right.
And I'm using you as in a Machiavellian manipulative way where I'm just trying to get you to do something so that I can win. Well, you're not going to follow that at all.
Right.
So,
and there's that feeling that there is somehow there's an environment of that. Somehow that gets created, and within which this kind of conversation happens, right?
That's why that's where values come into place. That's why we have this one of our 4 core values is called respect and connect. And then there's bullet points that describe what it means. Yeah. But that's why the connection piece is so important with your manager. Sure. Like if the manager can't sincerely try to put themselves in a position where they want everybody on their team member to have the best career that they could possibly have. Like, and that's the true heart.
Yes.
Then I don't think that they can be a successful manager in our culture. So you ask how this would go. I mean, like it starts out with, how are you? Like what's going on in your life? Like, how are you doing? Let's talk about the human stuff a little bit first and see where you're at, and maybe being vulnerable and sharing where I'm at.
Right.
Then from there, and that might take some time. Like that might be a lot of one-on-ones with a new employee before you're getting into just kind of, hitting them with all the points of improvement.
Yeah.
But then from there, you might get into, here's what I've noticed.
Right.
And this is kind of what I've observed. And then we really believe this is a lean tenet. So this is back to Edward Deming.
Yeah.
We really believe that, great management doesn't start, it might start with data, but it doesn't end with data. Like we don't just look at your metrics, like let's say you're a help desk engineer and we're expecting you to close 6 tickets a day and you're only closing 4.
Right.
Like that just tells us that we need to go look at what's happening. And then we call it go to the Gemba. That's a Japanese term.
Yeah.
Gemba means where the work is done.
Yeah.
So then we go and we observe you in your work.
Yeah.
And then we realize that because you're really bright and you're really smart, that you're picking all the hardest tickets that everybody else is doing. And the reason why your metrics are off is because you're one of the best, smartest, most creative and engineers on our team. And then we're like, okay, there's no problem there.
Right.
But let's say we go to the work and we go to the Gemba and we watch your work and we start seeing like, oh, well, when we watch you, your tickets go back up to 6.
Yeah.
So something's happening when we're not watching you, and when we are watching you and we don't know what that is. And we call this like, what's the problem? Is it that, did they get it? Do they want it? Do they have the capacity to do it? That's a Gino Wickman EOS idea. Right. So then we might think maybe there's like a motivation issue here.
Right.
And then we would address the problem directly with them and challenge directly. Like, your metrics are off.
Yeah.
When I went and observed you, I noticed you had no problem making the metrics.
Yeah.
It makes me think that you might be distracted when you're not being watched or something's changing.
Yeah.
And, here's why that doesn't work. You work on a team and this is or what do you think is happening here? Why do you think the numbers are going down?
Ask me a question. Yeah.
And, and like, what do you think we should do about it?
Yeah.
And if they don't have any answers, then, maybe it's like, let me maybe come back to and they might fess up to what's going on or why, what they're doing. And it might be that they're like helping, they're really interested in a different department.
Right.
And they're spending a couple hours a day shadowing a different department. And it's like, well, okay, I see why you're doing that. You actually want to do a different job, but you're sabotaging your career advancement here because you're not executing at your own job. So what we need to do is let's schedule a day for you to do that. So that we know on that day we're not expecting these numbers, and see if you can hold your number. It's like you just troubleshoot and debug what the problem is and why they might be distracted. Or it might be the case that it might be just obvious they're not following your process correctly. Or they need some technical education on firewalls because their firewall tickets are taking them way too long. And so there's a great manager has to kind of notice the problem maybe at a high level with a metric. Then they have to go see what's going on with their own eyes, so that they can see if they can see it in action. And then if they can see it in action, they might have some ideas on how to troubleshoot it or how to challenge directly. And if they can't see it, they might have to either keep watching or collaborate with the employee if it goes away when they're watching it. So it's it's not a simple thing. It's like they don't happen all the same. With each different problem that you might face, there might be a unique and novel approach. But ultimately, what managers are is they're problem solvers, and they're really trying to get to the bottom of what's holding back the highest and best production from a team member.
And Mike, you mentioned values, right? And you mentioned one value, and you said there is 4. So could you run down that list of the values that you hold dear, the core values?
Well, maybe even before I'll do that, I'll just offer you some learning around value. So we started trying to implement values very early. Again, I was in my mid-20s.
Right.
I read the book Good to Great by Jim Collins. I read Built to Last. Built to Last was the first time. Collins and Porras, they kind of noticed that these Built to Last companies had enduring values that endured across time.
Right.
And then when we tried to implement Vern Harnish's one-page business plan, the first thing you have to do is come up with values. And so we came up with values. And the exercises that were available to come up with values were insufficient. I'm just going to say it that way. The exercise, it was like, 2 paragraphs by Vern Harnish, and it was like, do a life raft where you take your best employees, you put them in a life raft, you brainstorm their characteristics, and you try to find correlations, and you try to create 4 groups that kind of fit your best people. That's a terrible idea. It's actually I really hate that idea. I hate Jim Collins' idea. He was all about making core values endure across time. It should be the lifetime of the leader. I really believe that values need to be iterated, just like a strategy is iterated, because the chances that you're going to get it right the very first time is close to 0. And even Jim Collins' data set, like he started with great companies.
Right.
Like, sure. Like if you start with a great company and research it, why are they great? It's probably because they iterated their values and they got their value system great and their culture great. And that's why they're great. But what about all the other data, all the companies that went out of business, and what if they kept their values and that's why they went out of business? So I think that what people need to do is they really need to have better tools for creating values. And so I want to talk about that while I maybe offer some insight.
You bring up something so important, which is that you just walked through this idea where you are a well-read guy. You're probably the most well-read guy I've ever talked to on this podcast, right? You are citing all these books and all these coaches and all these conversations, and you remember them, and you remember all the methodologies and thought models and all of the rest of it, yes? And at the same time, you said, you got to a point where I'm creating my own value system or my company's value system, and none of those fit me, right? This is so important, which is what, and I want to put a little plug of the Business Philosopher Within You is all about that. Because at the end of the day, it's you, right? All the rest of the books, and methodologies and modeling and all the rest of it doesn't, it's all there. And just like you have studied them, it's important to study them. It's important to get your MBA. But at the end of the day, it's here, right? This is so important that you have to have your, intuition, whatever you call it, your own sense of knowing and knowledge and your own deep truth. And you come to that from that. And you say, well, none of that is, and then you have your great insight, which is such a tremendous insight, that value is not static. And I'm kind of paraphrasing you. It evolves. It changes over time. And then you have to kind of go through that process of that change of value before you can kind of declare that to be your value. Something like that. I'm paraphrasing. So I wanted to stop you there. So my apologies for stopping you there. And please go ahead.
So the first problem with core values, almost all core values, is that nobody knows them.
Yeah.
Like if you think about this, like if you talk to any, like if you go ask a CEO, do you guys have core values? They all say yes. And then you say, what are they? And they kind of, it's funny because you could watch, they kind of know them, but they struggle a little bit to kind of get them perfectly. And it's like, look, man, if you don't know these things like cold, there's like a 0 chance that people, 2 levels from know them at all. Yeah. Like nobody's like, you don't know them well enough to get them. So your core value, this is a big challenge here, but your core values have to be memorable.
Yes.
And branded.
Yeah.
They have to, if people don't know what they are, then they're inaccessible. And if they're inaccessible, they're not useful.
Yeah.
So, I think of core values as a hierarchy.
Yeah. I'm sorry. A clarification. You said they have to be branded. Can you kind of elaborate on that?
Yes. I'm about to.
Okay. So sorry. Go ahead. Pyramid.
Like we remember brands, we remember images and colors and logos and all of these kind of things. Right. So, you need to brand your core values. Like you need to put some energy into it. It's your ethos.
Yeah.
And so our core values are really easy to remember, and you'll see why. Yeah. First of all, it starts with an acronym. RSVP.
Yeah.
So like by the end of this conversation, you'll know them.
Yes.
Because like you'll remember RSVP.
Yeah.
Like I know RSVP. I've used that acronym before. Right. That's simple.
Yeah.
So for the first thing we do is we offer a plug.
Yeah.
Okay. Then the next, that's like at the top. Yeah. That's the pinnacle. Yeah. Then right below that, each of those letters just have 2 words to remember. Mm-hmm. So R stands for respect and connect.
Yeah.
Easy to remember.
Right.
S stands for servant's heart.
Yeah.
Easy to remember.
Yeah.
P stands for progress over comfort.
Yeah.
Super. I missed a V. V stands for value.
Mm-hmm.
And then P stands for progress over comfort.
Yeah.
Now, the first thing you'll notice about those is like, I kind of get what they mean. Maybe I don't understand value very well, but I kind of understand what you mean when you say respect and connect. I know what those 2 words mean, and I can imagine what a culture would be like. Yeah. I kind of understand what servant's heart means as well. Yeah. And so value is confusing.
Yeah.
But it has something to do with value.
Yeah.
Maybe you'll explain it in a second. And then progress over comfort, I kind of get that too. We're not about trying just to be as comfortable as possible. We're trying to make some progress.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've got very memorable,
yeah,
pretty memorable, but what I've lacked is clarity.
Right.
By the way, I also want to point out that each one of those values has an icon, has imagery associated with it as well.
That's very neat. Yeah.
So now I've got something memorable, but it isn't necessarily clear.
Yeah.
But then each of those values has 4 or 5 bullet points that say a belief statement.
Yeah.
That describes, 4 we believe statements that describe what the values mean.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. And then each one of those belief statements has a whole bunch of philosophy underneath that. That's even deeper.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they're both memorable, clear, and deep.
Yeah.
Now there's one other component that values need, and they need to be aligned with your mission. So like if living the values won't manifest your vision, then either the vision needs to change or the values need to change.
Right.
Because like it's the code.
Yeah.
Like if everybody lives these values out every day, that's the operating system that's going to manifest the vision.
Sure.
So the final thing that they need to be is They need to be round or complete.
Yeah.
Like, what if I have 75% of the instruction set necessary to manage my, or to get to my vision, but 25% we're just off track all the time.
Yeah.
So they have to be like round. They have to be in balance. You can't have, if you might have one statement, but it might need a little bit of balance from another statement. That means that you're going to drive straight. Otherwise, you're just doing circles to the left because of one statement.
Sure.
So the value system is actually incredibly important. It needs to be memorable, clear, aligned, deep, and then it needs to be complete or round.
Yeah.
And so that's a lot to ask, but it is possible. And maybe by way of example, I can just give like one example of a belief statement. So under servant's heart, there are about 4 bullet points.
Mm-hmm.
The first one is one of my favorites, and it says, a leader's purpose is to serve their team so that team members can serve their customers and each other.
Mm-hmm.
That's just one of the 4 or 5 bullets.
Yeah. Yeah.
But in that bullet point, there's a book called The Motive by Patrick Lencioni, who I've mentioned on there, that talks about servant leadership.
Yeah.
And if you want to be a leader at Endsight, then it's required reading to read The Motive.
Right.
Because, we talk about leadership styles a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, if you're not talking about motive by the leader, then you've got a serious problem. Because like I already talked about earlier in the podcast, if the leader is, if their true motive is just to accrue, let's say, power or prestige or wealth to themselves, and that's really all they're in it for, then they're creating an impossible barrier for followership, because like nobody's going to follow.
Yeah, that's true.
So when the leader gets their motive right, when they want the best for the entirety of the ecosystem, which could include them.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it has to be completely self-sacrificial,
Right.
but it needs to include everybody in the ecosystem. And they can be included in that.
Sure.
So I don't want leaders to work against their self-interest. That would be some kind of moral hazard that won't work.
Yeah.
But they have to be included in a greater ecosystem where things go well. And if people know that, then they create a necessary precondition for followership.
Sure.
And so if the motive is wrong, like your style is not going to matter too much. You're just going to be stuck in people subverting you perpetually because they see you as some kind of tyrant out for yourself.
Yeah.
And so that bullet point is a necessary, let's say, precondition for our whole ethos, our whole helping others thrive. And so now there's probably like 20 bullets, and there's probably at least 20 books. There might be 40 books.
Right.
And so the further you get up in the leadership scale, the more of that material you have to understand, and there's source material to go to.
Yeah.
And then, you have it all. You have the memorable thing in RSVP, and then you have the deep thing in a book, called The Motive by Patrick Lencioni. So culture is just absolutely essential element.
Yes.
And one other maybe not final point, but one other point maybe I'll make before I do it is, when you think about values, they're constraining behavior. So take respect to connect. The first bullet point on respect to connect is that we believe that all people are worthy of respect and dignity.
Yeah.
And we talk about thorny things in that. So we might talk about, does a criminal deserve respect?
Yeah.
And my answer to that is, it's about us.
Yeah.
Like, they come through the legal system.
Right.
And if we want to hold on to our dignity, we have to treat them with dignity in our legal system.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean they don't get accountability.
Sure.
It doesn't mean that they're not going to be held accountable to their crime.
Yeah.
But we don't have to treat them with disrespect along the way.
Sure.
We can treat them with respect for us.
Right.
So that we remain dignified.
Exactly.
And so we believe in respect as a precondition. Now, you might think, well, why do I want as an employee to submit to a whole bunch of core values? Like, I'd rather just be free to do whatever I want. And the challenge with that, of course, is that you have to work in an environment where everybody gets to do whatever they want.
Yeah.
So if you want to act disrespectfully, that might be fine. That might be what you want, but you're going to be in an environment where everybody else is free to act disrespectfully too. The constraint is not just to you; it's to the entirety of the culture.
Yes, that's so important.
And that's why you make a trade-off. If you like it, if especially, by the way, it's perfect alignment if this is who I really want to be anyway. I want to act like this anyway. This is exactly how I want to be. This is how I envision myself.
Right.
I don't even really like it when I act out of alignment with my ideals. And so this place helps me be more of who I want to be anyway. And that makes a great set of core values.
Yes.